To move the motion on national food strategy and food security in my name and in the name of the Honourable Member for Bristol East, and pay credit to her for all her help in coordinating this debate today. And I particularly want to thank the Backbench Business Committee too for finding time for this debate. Madam Deputy Speaker, food security is a perennial concern. Even the meaning of food security causes concern and disagreement, but I'll use this definition as a starting point. Being able to feed the population at a reasonable cost, even in the face of future shocks such as global pandemic, massive harvest failure, or a general crisis of agricultural productivity caused by climate change. Although other colleagues may wish to expand on that definition and talk about a whole array of issues, for this is such a vast topic with so many important implications for farmers and for families and household food bills, particularly now, which we see rising with the cost of living crisis. But the UK is addressing the issues of food security, from using new approaches to agriculture like vertical farming, precision agriculture and genome editing, cutting food waste with government policies and new technology, producing alternative proteins from cultured insects and algae, not for the faint-hearted, and producing plant-based meat too, something that the UK leads the way on, and packaging food in an innovative way to reduce damage, prolong freshness and fight off bacteria. However, with the shocks we have suffered to our food security over the last 2 years, from the consequences of COVID and lockdowns, and now from the war in Ukraine, there is much more the government will need to do, particularly to help our local farmers. In the northwest, our 12,815 farming and growing community quietly go about their business, collectively producing a wealth of food commodities and contributing more than £726 million to the economy. And our UK farmers and growers are world leaders in food safety, animal welfare, traceability and environmental enhancements, with these values reflected through our UK annual food and drink export value of £2 billion. Now, I specifically want to focus on my little corner of the world, where over 70% of Cheshire County is still agriculture producing, with large swathes given to dairy, sheep and cattle farming. More than 7,000 people are employed on 2,804 farm holdings, covering nearly 160,000 hectares of land. And we are the home to some of the country's leading farms, dairy farms and dairies. For example, the Grosvenor Estate, Eastern Estate in Cheshire produces over 35 million litres of fresh milk a year, enough for 500,000 people every day. And in Tatton, we have County Milk, a family-run business and the largest privately owned dairy ingredient company in the UK. We have the award-winning Delamere Dairy, located in Knutsford, Bexton's Cheese in Knutsford, the award-winning Lambing Shed, run by the Mitchell family, Cheshire Smokehouse in Morley Green, Wilmslow, Mobley Ice Cream, there's lots of ice creams, Great Budworth Ice Cream, Seven Sisters Ice Creams, and Robert's Bakery. And I meet with my local farmers regularly, assisted and facilitated by the local NFU team. Now, there has always been concerns in farming, for livestock and the Great British weather are temperamental fellows to work with. But of late, these issues have got bigger and need to be addressed if we do want our food strategy to work. In Tatton, our farmers, like those across the country, are facing labour shortages, energy price increases up to 400%, fertiliser cost increases over 150%, red diesel increases, as well as increases in rural crime. Only the other week, I met with a group of local farmers at Shepherd's Farm in Aston by Budworth, and they had just invested £300,000 in a new milking shed, a new cubicle type. But they all concurred that now we are seeing particularly tough times. My farmers are renowned for good husbandry and good farming techniques, and they go to great lengths to look after their animals and land, for high quality care leads to high quality meat, milk and produce. But they need help to find staff, offer competitive training and apprenticeships, and for new farmers entering the profession, a chance to get a farm, and for those leaving it, a chance to relinquish a farm at a price that will provide for their retirement. So can the Minister please look into these matters as a matter of urgency? I know significant work has been done, but certainly more work needs to be done. And if the Minister can't provide a full answer today, then I'm more than happy for him to write to me. Now, another of my constituents is Philip Pearson, who, along with other members of his family, runs a family business called APS Group. Set up by his grandfather after the Second World War in Alderley Edge, is now the biggest tomato producer in the UK, producing approximately 650 million tomatoes a year. He explained quite clearly the horticultural sector in the UK is desperately short of staff to look after crops and to cope during the harvest. They would have expected 1,500 workers out of a peak total of 2,500 from Central and Eastern Europe each year from March to Christmas, but this has not been possible this year. So a question for the Minister, can these farmers have more visas for seasonal agricultural workers, rising from the current 30,000 to at least 50,000 as soon as possible? And can farmers employ Ukrainian nationals to help deliver an increase to those numbers of seasonal agricultural workers' visas, as well as other migrants housed now in the UK? And I expected other people to talk about the farming and the produce coming from their parts of the country. As I said, I'm focusing specifically on Cheshire, but I believe we are all sharing the same concerns here. So in my patch, farmers are leading the way in technology to developing robotics for, in this case, tomato production, starting with harvesting, going right the way through to packaging, putting in significant money and research into this development to cope with the lack of people now coming forward who want to work in the farming sector. But these robots won't be ready for 4 to 5 years, so they do need help now and for the short term to be able to deliver on their commitment to tomatoes for the country. And farmers care deeply about the environment too. This particular farm is working hard to deliver compostable packaging. They use their tomato plant waste to develop packaging, and they're using it for other sectors too, including for fake leather, for car seats, for coffee cups, and even for bactericidal treatment for the NHS. So they are charged a packaging tax, and yet they're developing green, biodegradable alternatives. So can the ministers let me know what incentives do we have for such great British technology and helping those companies providing these terrific developments, which are not just used here, but will be used right around the world? I will indeed give way. I want to thank the honourable member for joining in and adding that pertinent point. But we couldn't have this debate without talking about those high energy costs at the moment, over a 400% increase, and what is happening to farms with having to cope with those increased costs. For APS, this has resulted in reduced production of UK tomatoes and food because the cost of production was not covered through higher prices. And farmers have to be mindful of the higher prices that they pass on to their customers. If they can do that, if the supermarkets and shops that they're going to won't accept those higher prices, so we have to be mindful of how we are supporting them. This company has even developed a combined heat and power plant which supplies 3 megawatts of power to Alderley Edge, and they use the waste heat and the carbon dioxide from that to grow their crop. And I wonder if they can get some recognition that they use carbon dioxide produced from the power generation to produce food, because that would really help them to offset the huge increases of energy cost. I know BEIS are currently reviewing this move at the moment from the European Union Energy Trading Scheme to the ETS UK equivalent post-Brexit, but can the Minister liaise with his ministerial fellow sort of minister at Bays and give me the latest news on that. So food production is also essential for the delivery of the environmental benefits on which the government plans to centre in its agricultural support policy. But unless we recognise the dual role of farmers as food producers as well as conservationists, we risk turning farmers into environmental contractors with little incentive to continue farming. Now, this would do enormous damage to the jobs in the communities that depend on farming, as well as weakening our food security. So the strategy needs to be clearer in linking the food production to action against climate change and enhancing the natural environment. So that greater, one final plea I would like to put in is greater clarity on food labelling, so that the high standards of British food is known and recognised. So a shopper knows the quality of produce and where it is from, buying British and buying locally. For me, that means buying from Cheshire. But that is important, not just for the high husbandry standards that UK food provides, but also the low transport mileage to get from field to fork. And that low transit mileage is particularly important if you're concerned about the environment. And as my beef and sheep farmers say, it is better to have high quality beef and lamb from Cheshire than chickpeas from half a way around the world. Thank you for the cheers for that one. And when it comes to food standards, it really is important when the government's negotiating and implementing free trade agreements. We must avoid undermining the domestic sector for farmers and growers and reduce standards too. In its report on the UK-Australian Free Trade Agreement issued on the Friday, the 17th of June 2022, the Environmental, Food and Rural Affairs Committee concluded, in practice, it appears unlikely that food produced will lower animal welfare standards in the UK as a result of that deal. And that is positive news, but my farmers are also calling for greater transparency and labelling of food. For they believe in choice, as I believe in choice, but you only have choice when you have knowledge of what you are choosing and what you're choosing from. I will indeed. And this is the transparency that some people are calling for, to know what it is you're having, you're eating, you're enjoying, to appreciate the difference in cost and the treatment that the animals have gone through, because to have fair competition can only really come from accurate labelling and transparency of produce. Because the UK does produce some of the best food in the world with the highest standards of safety and animal welfare, and it's only right that people know in this country what they're getting. Finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, these Tatton farmers and producers are hard-working, dedicated to the sector, industrious, experts in their field with many generations of experience, and want to help solve the food security issues that this country is having. But along with this strategy, which goes some way, and along with awareness of what is happening around the world, more assistance is needed to help our farmers right here and now with the current problems that the world is facing.
The question is, as on the order paper,